Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be showing you how we created a pinch point in this location to give us a higher odds stand location during the hunting season. Pinch points, bottlenecks, deer funnels, these are all essentially the same thing. These are locations where the deer movement is constricted or consolidated down into a smaller area. So instead of having a random, more spread out movement like you're going to have in a lot of open hardwood settings, this makes the deer movement more predictable. And I want to do a video just on pinch points in the future, but a few examples are ponds, blowovers, areas where they have to kind of scoot around something, ditches, steep ravines, hillsides, an area of the river that they prefer to cross because it's a little bit higher than the rest, areas where there's connecting cover, meaning you have maybe a big woodlot on one side and a big woodlot on the other and a thin strip of cover that connects the two. That's a funnel, that's a pinch point. Deer really like easy. If they're trying to get from point A to point B and there's something in their way and it's relatively easy to go around it, then that's what they're going to do. They're just going to go around it. For those of you guys that have ponds on your property know what I'm talking about. If the deer are on one side of your pond and they want to get to the other side, they're not going to walk right through the middle, even if it's shallow. They're going to walk around the outside. And there's likely going to be a trail on each side of the pond depending on which trail the deer want to take for a variety of reasons. But as a hunter, you can take advantage of this and sit on the downwind edge of the pond and have a higher odds stand location because the deer are going to be pinched down as they're working their way around the pond. And that's just one of the many examples of pinch points. Again, I want to do a video just on pinch points in the future, but in this video, I wanted to show you guys how we created a pinch point in this location to give us a really high odds stand location during the hunting season. So to kind of paint the picture for you guys a little bit here, we are at the southern end of our property, and our property is 800 yards long by about 200 yards wide, so a very long, skinny piece of property. And in our immediate area, there is not a whole lot of cover. So our property and a few of our neighbors' properties have a majority of the cover. Now this is a huge advantage from a hunting standpoint because as the deer are moving from one location to another, they're going to use the cover to do so. So because our property runs primarily north to south, we're going to control a lot of the movement as the deer are trying to either go from north to south or south to north. On the southern half of our property, we also have cover to the east and to the west. So the deer use the southern half of our property a lot as they move from those pieces of cover. And as we zoom out on the map a little bit, you can see that the vertical north-south movement and the horizontal east-west movement make a T on the southern half of our property. So just by looking at a map, you can see that this general area by default is a really high odds area. You're going to get a lot of east-west movement and you're going to get a lot of north-south movement. Now looking at the satellite map was a great place to start, but then it came down to scouting. I needed to find where those east-west trails met the north-south trails, and that put me in this spot right here. By the way the cover's laid out, this is where a majority of the trails are coming together. This is a pretty good stand location just by default. But we wanted to put it on steroids by creating a pinch point. So the very first thing that I did, where all these trails are coming together, I created a mock scrape and I buried a water hole. That's going to make this intersection a lot more attractive. It's going to be a huge social hotspot for the local deer herd. And by just putting in those two improvements by themselves, I turned what was a good stand location into a great stand location. Again, they're already using this area, but I made it much more attractive by putting in a mock scrape and a water hole. Another thing that I did was I created a new trail that wraps around the east side of my property that connects to existing deer trails. I wanted to make sure that they had an easy way to get to this spot from any direction. And for the most part, everything has been going according to plan. This has been a great spot to hunt, a great spot to hang a camera. This area gets a lot of activity. And over the past 2 years, there have been several new trails that have popped up, all converging on this one spot. And this is where creating the pinch point comes in. There are so many trails in the area. A lot of them are coming into this one spot, but there are also trails that are kind of moving behind my stand. I don't know if you can see it or not, but I think over this shoulder right here, you can see there's a ladder stand back there, and there's a trail that runs on the edge of my neighbor's cow pasture behind my stand. So downwind of my stand, so not a good thing. I don't want deer to take that trail and get downwind of me ever. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to block that trail. I'm going to push the deer to this location, and then I'm going to allow them to go back to the trail that they want to be on. So it's going to be a little bit of a detour. Just like the pond we talked about in the beginning. It's not going to be a huge detour. It's going to be a little detour around my stand and then back to where they want to go. So to accomplish this, I'm going behind my stand to where that existing deer trail is, and I'm either dropping the larger trees or hinge cutting the smaller trees to block that trail. And if I'm hinge cutting relatively low, anywhere from knee high to waist high. I don't want these deer crawling under there to get through. I don't want them bedding back in there. I'm really making this a tangled mess. I'm crisscrossing the trees. I don't want there to be escape paths back there. I want that to be pretty difficult to navigate through, so the deer take the easy path and work the edge all the way around. And as they work their way around, they're going to be rewarded because they're going to get to check the scrape, they're going to get a drink of water, and then they can go right back on their way. Again, a lot of the deer were already doing this because they want to check the scrape, they want to get a drink, but some deer were using the path behind the stand. But now with all those trees blocking that trail, I'm cutting that down even further. I'm pushing more deer to this spot. And so that takes care of the trail behind my stand. But there's also kind of a lot of trails that just are meandering through this area in general. So I want to pinch down the movement as much as possible to this one spot. So what I did is I found the trails that I really wanted to promote during the winter and the early spring, when it's really easy to identify these deer trails. I went through and identified the ones that I really wanted to promote. And then I went through with flagging tape. You can find it on Amazon or any hardware store. And I just marked the trail. Marking your trails is important for a few reasons. One is because once the snow melts, it's a little bit harder to identify where exactly those trails were. And when possible, I really like to use existing deer trails. They're using that path for a reason. And so if it fits into the plan, use the existing trail. The second reason why marking your trails is so important is because once you start dropping trees down, it's going to be a lot more difficult for you to find exactly where that trail was, unless you have some sort of a marker to let you know. So of the 6 to 7 trails that headed west from this location, I picked 3 of them that I thought, 1, the deer would like to use, and 2, would give me great shot opportunities as the deer moved into this spot. The next thing we did, just like we did behind the stand, is we dropped trees to block the trails that we did not want the deer to use. But because we still want deer to move in this direction and use the trails that we picked out for them, this is where the flagging tape comes in. When all those trees are on the ground, it's going to look like a jumbled mess. And the only way you're going to be able to find that trail again is with that flagging tape. And so the next step after dropping the trees is to go in and open the trails that you want to promote back up. Once I've cut up those down trees and any logs on the ground to promote my path, then I'm going through with a backpack blower or a rake because I really want to smooth that trail out as much as possible. Remember, in a lot of cases, this is already an existing deer trail, but I want to make it as attractive as possible to really increase my chances that they're going to use it. And obviously you need to cut the logs that are blocking the path, but even by removing the small sticks and removing the leaves, you're giving the deer a very easy way to get through that mess that you just created. And if a deer is just casually walking through your woods, they're going to want a pretty easy way to get through. And a buck during the rut, he's trying to sneak through. If he knows that there's a trail that he can be really quiet on, stay in cover, there's a really good chance that he's going to use that trail. Another byproduct of knocking all these trees down behind the stand and to the west side of this scrape is I'm letting a lot more sunlight into this location now. So I'm going to be getting a lot more new growth in the next few years. So as everything else gets thicker, I can maintain the several deer trails that are coming into this location that I want the deer to use. The thicker everything else gets, the easier these trails will be to use, and that just increases the chances that the deer are going to use these trails to get to this spot. One thing you do want to watch out for anytime you're cutting trees down behind your stand is you don't want to cut down too much, because if you cut down too much, you're going to stand out like a sore thumb. You don't want there to be a situation where your stand doesn't have any cover to break up your silhouette behind you, because then during the hunting season, if you just have blue sky or gray sky and you move a little bit, it's just going to increase the chances that the deer are going to be able to pick you off. So try your best to leave some vertical cover behind your stand just so you can stay hidden as a hunter. Another tip, and this one's not nearly as important, this is more of a comfort level thing. If you're doing this type of work, try your best to get it done before it gets warm out. When you're out here cutting trees and you've got all the safety equipment on, whether it's jeans, chaps, your boots, long sleeve coat, helmet, glasses, it gets really hot really fast. You're going to get exhausted a lot quicker, so you're not going to be able to do as much work in a day compared to if it was a little cooler out. So guys, that's pretty much it on how we made a good stand even better by creating a pinch point in this location. Again, to kind of recap what we did, we had an already great stand location where there's a lot of intersecting trails, but there's also a lot of trails in the surrounding area. So we're dropping trees to block those trails where we don't want the deer to go, to push them to this location. And again, to do that, we're either just dropping trees or hinge cutting trees to block the trails we do not want the deer to take. And we're cutting sections out of those downed trees to open up the paths that we want the deer to take. Once we have the trails that we want the deer to take opened up, then I'm going through with either a leaf blower or a rake to really clean out the trail. Again, they're probably going to use the trail anyways, but this just makes it more attractive. Again, hopefully this makes sense, guys. If you do have any questions on this pinch point in particular or pinch points in general, please leave those in the comment section below. I'll get back to those as soon as I can, and we will see you guys in the next video.